now that we know we're recording, what's up?
Hey, JR. So
that was interesting.
Yeah, we've been doing this show for like 8 months, recording on Zoom, and it's never once informed us that we were recording. We just had the little red dot in the corner saying, "Hey, we're doing it."
But she had Zoom, and Zoom's a female. She actually told us that we're recording. So, what's up, everybody? I'm JR.
Hey,
that's Chase, and this is FN Wrestling. But we are jumping the barricade from here on out, baby.
That's right.
So yeah,
we're barricade and changing names.
Exactly.
Not for legal reasons. There's not like another effing wrestling.
No.
This is totally our decision.
Yeah, 100%. 100%. More details later, you know.
Yeah. We'll do a whole episode on why we'll do a whole mini episode on why we're changing names because things are coming.
For sure. But this episode, man, so this one here is it was special, man. It's we interviewed George Pantas.
Yeah, man.
George Pantas.
And you had this one on the books for a while, and you've been talking to him, exchanging messages for quite a bit, because this man, while he was a teacher, a principal, a history teacher, I like to think we interviewed the historian of professional wrestling with this guy.
It's crazy. I mean, it's crazy. Like the video archives that he has that he's actually sold to WWE. Mm-hmm. And it's amazing. Just his stories, and we haven't even heard 2% of what he's done or anything.
Ladies and gentlemen, if you listen to the show, I like to say everyone who's a guest is a friend of the program and are welcome back anytime. And if you've been on the show and are listening, I want you to know that's a true statement. But George is someone I hope comes back quite often. I mean, we, like you said, there's a plethora of sweaters and of stories that this man has to tell us about for wrestling. He has the footage of Buddy Rogers, the Nature Boy, versus Ric Flair.
The battle of the Nature Boy. The battle of who decides who's going to be called the Nature Boy from here on out.
Yeah.
So, like, think about that. Like, that's huge. What if Ric Flair did not win that match?
Yeah. What if they had booked him different? Like, what if the booking had been different? What if they just decided not tonight? What if it was not a passing of a torch moment?
Wow.
What would wrestling history look like without? Would Ric Flair even be Ric Flair? Would he have reached that pinnacle? Who knows?
Who knows? And the story he told just about Buddy willing to drive down and do the job.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like that story in itself, like just that story and the story of him working his way down ringside to get footage, and just people. I just hope just sit back and enjoy, just soak it all in. Like this is the first of hopefully many interviews we'll have with him. It's a pleasure. It's an honor to talk to him and to call him a friend. And I don't know what else to say.
This guy has seen it all. The matches that you cannot find, this man has watched. He saw the original, not the WWF trilogy of Ricky the Dragon Steamboat and the Nature Boy Ric Flair. He saw the original back when these guys were in their 20s doing like hour-long matches, not in their 30s. I mean, and the pinnacle when you saw WWF was amazing. And this, ladies and gentlemen,
this is incredible.
From the bottom of my heart, and what I assume is also the bottom of JR's heart, thank you for always watching FN Wrestling. Welcome to Jumping the Barricade. Get ready for one hell of an amazing interview.
Definitely. Enjoy Mr. George Pantas, everyone. We are blessed and honored and privileged to be joined by Mr.
Special guest,
George Pantas. Mr. George Pantas, hello and welcome, sir. How are you doing?
Thank you for coming on this show, sir.
Thank you both. Thank you, gentlemen. Equally blessed and very, very humbled to be here. Thank you. Very excited.
Oh man, the pleasure. Like I said again, the pleasure is all ours. Your story, sir. I mean, it's just the first time a mutual friend, told me about your backstory and everything, and it grabbed my attention, and I was just so interested from the first I heard of it. I'm going to let you do the honors, of course, and we'll get started from I guess kind of the beginning.
Okay.
Tell us, I guess, your story about you coming to America story and becoming a fan of wrestling and all that good stuff.
Well, I'm 65 years young. Came to America when I was 10 years old. not speaking a word of English. I still don't. I speak American. Haha. Chase, I like to tell jokes. The problem is they're so bad.
No.
Oh, I love
So
it.
hopefully JR will work in a little pa-dum-pum.
I got you.
Oh, we got sound. We're working with sound effects nowadays. We're moving up.
So we were very poor, small village in Greece, about 500 people. Honestly, when we moved to this area in Virginia, we discovered Colonial Williamsburg, and I would love. I'm a retired educator, history major, and
that's awesome.
Administrator, and all those things.
Thank you very much for that, man. Educators are important.
My pleasure. And I would love going to Colonial Williamsburg because it reminded me. Remember, now Colonial Williamsburg is like America 200 years ago. It reminded me of my village. Okay. It was in essence that, not backward, but we had no electricity, we had no running water in the house. We weren't poor, we were po. We couldn't even afford the letter R. I mean, that was and it wasn't until I came here that I was like, oh my goodness. But my father, came here first and brought us 2 years later, my mother, sister, and I, and wanted a better life for us. I grew up here in Hampton, Virginia, and eventually discovered wrestling on TV. Back in those days, we had the Virginia Squires. I don't know if anybody's familiar with them, but a basketball team. Dr. J was on there.
Wow.
He's a big name.
I know that name, yeah.
And that was really the entertainers or the athletes that would come to this, to come to our area. And then I discovered professional wrestling, Mid-Atlantic Championship Wrestling, Bob Caudle, David Crockett. Oh my God. And then, of course, I didn't understand anything they were saying. But
that's almost, you almost don't even need to. I mean, there's such like this physical language. It's just like almost like watching ballet in a way. Like like you said earlier before we started recording, it's live comic book. Yes.
And I was enthralled, I was enamored, I was everything. And then I found out back then, every second Thursday they would come to the Norfolk Scope, which is literally about not even 20 minutes away from where I was. And then once or twice a month on Saturdays, they would come to the Hampton Coliseum. The loop was Thorpe. The loop was the Norfolk Scope. And then from there, Hampton Coliseum. And actually Thursday nights was the Norfolk Scope. Friday night, they would go to Richmond. And so fell in love with it. Eventually grew up, and as I got older and I was able to drive, my father allowed me to go. We were like not even 10 minutes away, as long as my grades were good. And they were, because I had to go to the wrestling. And then it was there that, God is so good. Always, always, always. So I loved it, JR, when you said blessed, because I truly believe that we all are very blessed. And unbeknownst to me, I ran into a friend from church, much older than I there. And he turned out to be, I knew what he was for a living. His name Tony Anthony, and he was the sports editor for our major newspaper that we had. And so there's a gentleman by the name of Jim Crockett, of course, owned the business, but he had promoters. And one of the promoters was Mr. Murnick, Joe Murnick. And his responsibility was part of North Carolina and Virginia. The show down in Carolina at the studio. And then from there, they would take the tape, because tapes were very expensive back then. They were the 3/4-inch tapes, so not like the VHS that everybody had, but the thick quality for camera purposes. And then once they had their storyline taped, then they would bicycle the tape, meaning they would take it from one TV station to another. So they would bring it over here, our local, they aired it on the local NBC affiliate. They would air it. And then once they finished with it, they would take that tape up to Richmond. and then the people would see the stories develop.
Wow.
Okay,
That's cool.
so when Mr. Murnick would come here to develop to bring the tape to the TV station, he would meet. Now this I learned years later. He would meet with Tony Anthony, the sports editor, so he could buy advertising space for the newspaper, and the two became good friends. So these are two grown adults. I'm a teenager, and I happened to be at the Hampton Coliseum this one night that Tony Anthony was there. And very rare, Mr. Murnick did not come often. He was much older. His sons basically would run this area. But Mr. Murnick was there. And so Tony Anthony introduced me to Joe Murnick and basically said, you know, this is George. He loves wrestling. We're friends from the church. Please take good care of him. And that's how I got into professional wrestling. Mr. Murnick allowed me to do anything. Now, we know what kayfabe means. We know how privately and how protected the business was back then.
Absolutely.
Okay. Well, I'm a very frustrated director. Okay.
I know how that feels. I know how that is.
Yeah. All three of us.
Myself, yes.
Yes.
How that is.
So that's another mutual love that we have.
Right. Yes, sir.
And so I bought first a regular 8mm camera, silent.
Mm-hmm.
And then from there, I advanced to the Super 8 camera, silent. And then because the sound was just so expensive, especially to develop it.
Yes, sir.
And at that time, there were little reels about 3.5 minutes long. And so I wound up going down, and that's a story that I can tell if you guys want, but I wound up being able to go down to the floor.
Will you please, sorry to interrupt, will you please tell that story?
Okay.
Let's stay there.
Yeah, JR has said this story has to be told. So please,
this is amazing.
Mr. Pantas,
Okay, very good.
Please tell it.
So remember, we were poor, and even though the ticket prices now they sound outrageous, you know, $2, $3, $4, $5, $6, there's a big difference between $2 and $6 when your father's only bringing $90 in a week or something,
right?
And you had to buy everything else. So it was, for us, it was expensive. So I could not afford the ringside seats. So what did I do? I would buy the cheapest seats I could get. And then once up there, I decided to take a little piece of paper and write on the piece of paper my license plate. And then I would go up I would always look for a young lady. If it was a guy, I'd find somebody else, a young lady that was an usher. And hi, this person left their lights on. Now remember, it's my license plate.
Sir.
Because it's hot. I'm still a good guy. I didn't want her to say, okay, thank you, I'll give it to somebody. Yeah. And even if I made up a number, you know, some poor guy goes, oh, that's mine. So they would never do that, though, because they were way up on top. And this is before radios and communications and stuff like that. So you could see in her face, oh, my God, what do? I can't leave my spot. So then at that point, I would smile and say, I'd be more than happy to take this paper down to the announcer, the ring announcer, so he can say it. They were relieved. And then I made sure to read her name. And then as I would go down, because inevitably I would be stopped by somebody. Oh, Mary said I could go down and talk to the ring announcer because this person left the lights on. So that's how I got myself down there. And I would always scope. Before I did that, I would scope to see where the empty seats were.
Right.
And then I would watch. If they were watching me, then I had no choice. I had to go to the ring announcer. And then sometimes I would just say, hello, how are you? Sometimes I would give him the paper. He would read it. It all depended on how I was being watched by the ushers.
You're reading the room.
And then I would just once the lights went, because the beauty back then was they would turn the lights off. Right. And the old school was the ring in the middle, lights on top, so darkness all the way around. So once the lights went off, I could disappear in the darkness and eventually find a nice seat there, right up front or next to somebody.
That's beautiful.
They would let me sit between them. It was awesome.
That's amazing.
That
is. I mean, the first time I heard that,
wound up on the floor. That's how I saw Tony, kind of backing back into the first part of the story. Introduced me to Joe, and then I had the camera, and when I would go down there, I would just the ring announcer was a local DJ, so he had no idea who these wrestlers were. And one of the times that I went over there, he goes, you know, you keep coming to me with this, with this stuff. Do you know these guys? I said, oh yeah. And then I was smart enough. Oh, he doesn't know. So I picked up on that and I said, would you like for me to tell you about him? I would have to sit over here. He said, yeah, you can sit over here. Now he only had one chair, but hey, you make a decision and you beg for forgiveness later, right?
Exactly.
Oh yeah.
At that point, I'd go to the back. And this is before anybody else gave me permission. I would go to the back, grab a chair. The ring announcer asked me to bring the chair and sit over there. And that's how I wound up next to him. And then I would film. And eventually, and I don't know if I told you this part of the story, JR, before or not, but eventually, remember Chase, I said that the sons, it was Elliot Murnick and Carl Murnick. They were the two sons that helped the father run the territory. And Elliot liked me, Carl did not. So Carl saw me one time sitting right over there and tells me to move, and does it a second time. The third time, meaning different nights, the third time his parents were there. So when he told me to move the third time, I went straight up to his mother. This is a true story. And I said, Carl won't let me sit there and film. And I'll never forget it. I could see it. Now, this is 40 years ago, probably longer than that, 45 years ago. And I can see it in front of me like it was yesterday. You know how when a parent is angry, points to the child and goes, come here now?
I've seen that look a few times.
Definitely.
And then she said, George is our friend. Leave him alone. He can sit wherever he wants to sit, and he can film whatever he wants to film.
My goodness.
And that's how I was able to get this footage. And then we can talk about how he wound up in the WWE and all that. But that's how I again, blessed at that time to be allowed to film. And and JR, have you seen some of my footage on the network or not?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Chase, have you?
I have not. JR has spoken about it and told me what to look for, but I haven't had an opportunity yet.
And I say network, of course, it's now on the Peacock
network.
Yeah.
But it is on there, and we can say for the audience real quick, if they're interested in this,
please.
Just go into the hidden gems, and then under there, the ones that they've posted so far are all Ric Flair matches. So it's Ric Flair versus the Nature Boy Buddy Rogers. That was the Battle of the Nature Boys. And then I'll expand on that if you like when we talk about selling the
WWE. There is nothing that we wouldn't. Any story you have, sir, please. These are all. I mean,
floor is yours.
Like that. The Battle of the Nature Boys alone is like wrestling pedigree and prestige alone.
Yes. And then another one is Greg Valentine versus Ric Flair, which, by the way, I'll give you guys a scoop. There's a so this is a first. I have not said this to anybody else. So this is
wrestling exclusive.
The A&E network with the WWE, they right now have two types of wrestling shows on A&E. One is the Biography Legends, the WWE Biography Legends, and the other one is WWE's Most Wanted Treasures. On one of the episodes of Most Wanted Treasures, this has not aired yet, but they are doing it on Greg Valentine and Brutus the Barber. On that episode, they're going to show my footage of the match between Greg and Ric Flair.
That is
super excited about that. I can't wait.
So cool.
On the Peacock, just to have a bigger audience see it.
Absolutely. And I mean, like the footage you got where these guys almost like coming up in their way. I mean, this is the territory days. It's those. It's the Wild West days where they're just hopping around and these amazing matchups that never really made it to television before, that we never saw, where these guys would like, because I know in WWF when I was watching, Ric Flair and Red Valentine, they both were uber talented, but they weren't on the same scale, so you wouldn't quite see them match up, and you would see that for them to be equals in the ring too, and to capture that on film is so incredible. It's
you often hear when they ask Ric Flair or Ricky Steamboat, about how were your matches between the two of you, that 1989 matches that you guys had in WCW, and they both say, yeah, that they were good matches, but you should have seen us 10 years before.
Yeah,
when we were wrestling for Jim Crockett Promotions, and we were wrestling in the arenas. Well, I have those matches too.
Matches.
And actually, some of that is also on Peacock now. It's it's the Rivalries series. So if those listening, if you not Google, but if you go on there and type Flair and Steamboat Rivalries, the first 12 minutes has a lot of my footage on there as well between the two of them.
Which is probably that rivalry, those matches might be my 3 favorite matches. My favorite rivalry of all time.
Top 5 best rivalries of all wrestling is Steamboat and Flair. I mean, Steamboat's like the ultimate face.
Right.
To me, I mean, I always just saw Richie Steamboat as going, I don't think he ever went heel, I don't think, his entire career.
No.
And then Flair was always like the least bad guy in the ring.
Yes.
Like, he was never the good guy. He was never the face, but he was always like, hey, you're worse than Flair when it comes to heels, I guess.
Right. And I was blessed to see them go at the Norfolk Scope. They came in Thursday night and they went to an hour draw for Flair's title. And then 2 weeks later, they came back and it went to an hour and a half draw. Just incredible. That
that's unheard of.
That's my favorite match.
Man, that's Ric Flair. That's a Steamboat. Those guys knew conditioning. They understood what wrestling was all about. It's like the storytelling, something like that.
Yes.
I mean, Ric Flair had maybe and it's no insult to him. He had maybe like 10 moves entirely, and one of them was an eye poke. And but that man knew how to tell the story inside the ropes, and I mean, just how to sell cheating, how to sell beating up the hero, how to sell his own moves. God, I could talk about Ric Flair. Me and JR are North Carolina kids.
Yeah.
So Ric Flair is kind of king to us.
Yes, sir.
So
same here.
So going on.
Only one nature boy. Woo!
Right. Woo! So going back, so during those times when you were able to sit there and see all this amazing talent just close up, who was your favorite wrestlers during those times when you were still a fan, but also able to capture the moments on camera?
Yes, and definitely a fan is the correct way of saying it. The camera, when both of you will appreciate this. I mentioned that I went from a regular 8 to a Super 8. And then when I had the Super 8 sound, I had a boom mic on the camera. And it made me look more
official, more professional.
More official, yes.
Yeah.
Some of the fans that would come there for the first time and didn't know that I was there, every time the shows were there, they would say, "Oh, which local station are you from?"
Oh, yeah.
Of course, I would eat it up. Oh, yeah, I'm with NBC, yes. Because of that boom mic.
Of course. Yes, sir.
George, I'll have to tell you about how I met Kurt Angle.
But to answer your question, JR, one will always be Ric Flair. He's the one that I modeled myself after. I don't know if you saw the picture that
on Facebook,
that I have on Facebook. I mean, I wanted to be Ric Flair so bad. I parted my hair in the middle. I grew it long, not long like his, but and that's in the early 70s. And blessed to eventually get to know him and had some fun times togetgether.
I can only imagine. That's the nature boy, like limousine riding, like jet flying, kiss stealing, son of a gun.
So I've always liked the bad guys.
Right.
And also at that time, it was easier, believe it or not, even though they worked their gimmick about not being fan friendly, if you could catch them in the back. And I was smart enough, I figured out a way to talk to them. Actually, I need to tell this part of the story.
Yeah.
The Minnesota Wrecking Crew, Ole and Gene Anderson.
Gene.
Okay. All right. So the very, very first wrestler I attempted to meet, I had to be like maybe 14, 15, was, I guess 16. As soon as I was able to drive, so 16, was Gene Anderson. I just saw him. And back then, they didn't have the security that we have today. It was just a little rope. And he was just, in the back there watching the matches. So I just stepped right over and I went up to him and I said, "Hello." And before I could say anything else, get the blankety blank out of my blankety blank face. Whoa.
Now, was this kayfabe aggression or was this just like?
But I tell you what, it clicked in my head that, well, he doesn't know who I am. He doesn't know that Mr. Murdoch is okay with me. So I made sure from that point on, if I wanted to talk to JR and I are friends, but Chase, you and I have never met, and you don't know anything about me, I'm going to make sure you see me talking to JR first. So then in your mind, you're going to say, oh, well, if this guy is friends with JR and I is coming over there to talk to me, he must be okay because JR is talking to him.
Oh, friendly.
And it was that process that I used. You know, I made sure Valentine saw me talking to Flair before, you know, I would talk to him and so on.
Right.
So
that's smart.
Yes, smart. And I started to say that it was easier to meet the bad guys because none of the fans wanted to talk to them. and with the good guys, all the girls, as soon as they would kind of poke their head out, all the girls were right there. Those guys weren't stupid. They would talk to the girls. But as a guy just trying to get through to say hello, it was impossible. So I'm like, well, forget this. I'll just I'll go to the other guy over there that
so to the villain.
Have the fans around. Yes.
Oh, that's great.
So Ric Flair, huge Ricky Steamboat. He had, at that time, he was married to a girl from Norfolk, so that gave us a local connection.
Right.
And I just loved his move and the matches. The names for me back then, I don't know if you guys are going to recognize. Of course, I mentioned Ole and Gene Anderson, Johnny Weaver, Greg Valentine, Wahoo McDaniel, Blackjack Mulligan. Those were the guys that I loved watching in the ring. And we should pay homage and respect to one of the greats that just passed the other day, Don Cornurl. He was, I think, 3 times tag team champion with Sergeant Slaughter for the Mid-Atlantic tag team title. And their matches, the Sergeant Dons versus Ricky Steamboat and Jay Youngblood, I mean, they were, no exaggeration, they were selling out Greensboro and the Charlotte Coliseum, and the cars were backed up for miles trying to get in.
Wow.
With no tickets to be had.
No, I remember hearing stories about, I'm not too familiar with Jay Youngblood and everything, but I've heard a lot about.
It's just a whole bunch before you guys' time.
Right. but I've heard stories, and I mean, from everything I've heard, he was incredible.
Yes. But those were the guys that I enjoyed watching. This name, I will be very surprised if you guys know, it was a tag team. I've always liked tag teams.
I'm a huge tag team wrestling fan.
Together. Rip Hawk and Sweet Hansen, and they were managed by Playboy Gary Hart.
Gary Hart. Is it Stan? Is it Stan Hansen or
Rip Hawk and Sweet Hansen? So Stan was actually a few years later. So
okay.
Okay, that might be where I think I'm knowing. I know the manager.
Yes,
Gary Hart. Goodness
gracious. Because he's definitely more well known with everything he did in Dallas and all that. But they broke them up, and they were feuding against each other. I honestly was crying because I couldn't believe, this is when everything was real.
Everything was real then,
and it still is.
It's still real to me.
And I couldn't believe that the two of them would be fighting like that. It was a cage match and blood everywhere. Oh my God.
I remember talking about It's Still Real, being a kid, and the first time I ever saw The Undertaker lose a match, I just kind of remember, no, this doesn't happen. He's undefeatable. He's a monster. I remember freaking out and just honestly shouting to my dad, going, no, you gotta come see this. The Undertaker just lost. This doesn't happen. This isn't how the world works. So I understand that whole losing your mind over things.
Yes.
Just getting worked into the story of it all.
And by the way, I was at WrestleMania 30 when he lost the match. Silence, shock. It was. I still don't have words to this day. It was just.
I like to call it it's one of the biggest mistakes in wrestling. They shouldn't have done that. Not to get off the history that we're talking about, but in the Undertaker, if anyone has I know the idea of wrestling is when you finally retire, you go out on your back, you put someone over. That is the ideal of wrestling. And the Undertaker is one of those old school guys. But if anyone was going to go out with a record and a win, it's him. He's earned it. He is the force of the WWE. He's been loyal. He's carried that company on its back. they should have at least let him keep his WrestleMania record. That's just one of those things.
JR, how do you feel about that? And then I'll give my opinion.
I guess I agree. I understand, I guess, why they did it. I mean, he was the next big thing. I mean, you know what I mean? They had to do it. You know, it was his time. If it had to happen at some point, and if it was going to happen with somebody, there's nobody else really that I could believe it with. So I was okay with it.
I was not okay with it.
Thank you, George. Thank you. Thank you.
I also, because I'm a huge Undertaker fan, and I don't know if JR told you this, Chase, but I was this close. I was this close to being the real Paul Bearer.
I did not tell him that.
Whoa. All right,
brother. Would you please?
Whoa. Whoa. Okay.
And this is, and honestly, I think I'm almost positive this is the first time I'm saying it on I've been interviewing a couple of different formats, but this is the first time I'm sharing this part of the story on a podcast.
Awesome.
Number one, people don't believe you when you say it. And number two, it's like after a while, oh, well, you know, whether believe me, you don't believe me, you know, that's what it is. But enough time has passed, and I have done certain things in my career that if you can't see because of what other things I've done that I'm telling you the truth, then, you know, I can't help you. And somewhere
that's their loss.
Yes. So you ready?
Let's do it.
Please. I'm like chomping at the bit to hear this. Like Paul Bearer was like, yes, please.
Okay. So first you have to kind of, and Chase, after we finish, I want you to go on my Facebook and look at some of my older pictures with my hair black.
Amazing.
With just a mustache, not the little beard that I'm trying to grow here.
Yeah.
And I honestly looked like Paul Bearer, to the point that I would be stopped and this is when I was just a fan. That I would be stopped in the street, let's say, or at a mall, and say, "Oh, you're Paul Bearer." And no, I'm not. Eventually, it got to the point that people, and I'm talking here in this area, and people would say, "George," I mean, they wouldn't say George. They say, "Yes, you are. You just, you don't want to admit it." And finally, I just said, "The heck with it." So sometimes I would honestly just write Paul Bearer just to get him off my back,
just to make their day, you know.
But after that happening over and over again, I'm like, well, wait a minute. Why not do something about it? If people really think I look so much like him. I had a very, very dear friend by the name of J.J. Dillon.
Wow.
I'm waiting for Chase's.
I know.
So cool.
You mean the manager of the greatest faction in all of wrestling?
Yes.
Okay. Yes. Very dear friend.
Oh my God.
And it was because of the footage, by the way. We may have to do a part 2 on this.
We'll do a part 2 through 20. Yes.
So I'll save the story of how JJ and I became friends, but for another time. But at that time, JJ was working in WWF back then as talent relations. He was the one that hired the people. And so I'm like, if there's ever a time, it's all about timing, right?
Yeah.
If there's ever a time that I can pitch an idea to somebody that knows that knows who I am as a person, and at least will hear it rather than just throw it in the trash can. This is the time. And so I decided, I came up with the greatest story ever told, if you will. And this is around the time when Kane had made his debut. And so the idea that I came up with was, I'm the real Paul Bearer, and that other Paul Bearer is my evil brother who had me locked up in an insane asylum. Kane found me, got me out. I'm going to manage Kane. So it'll be this Paul Bearer and Kane versus Undertaker and that Paul Bearer. And then the payoff would be, this is as far as my brain got, the payoff would be at WrestleMania where I turn on Kane and Undertaker continues, his winnings. And then, and honestly, that's as far as my thought process got. So that
Bring
was
us
the
out.
idea.
That was their loss, George. That would have been amazing.
That was the idea. Thank you. I think so too. But everything happens for a reason.
Oh, absolutely. But that idea that the evil brothers,
Yes,
the multiple evil twins around that time period, that was WWE's loss.
And I appreciate it. If you remember the whole Earl Hebner and Dave Hebner when they did, right?
Yeah.
So anyway, I pitched it, but going back to the same comment, timing is everything. This is also around the same time that Vince was going through his steroid trial, that so much was going on. They were actually cutting talent. Not only were they letting talent go, because all the money was being spent on the lawyers to fight the whole stuff with the government, but also they were cutting salaries. As a matter of fact, JJ wound up leaving soon after that because they had cut his salary so much. And all that is documented in his book, by the way. If you guys like wrestling history, I definitely recommend Ole Anderson's book and J.J. Dillon's book. Those are my 1 and 2. If you want to really know the history of professional wrestling in this, in this area.
Awesome. Well, we'll look
at you guys are Carolina guys, you will really, really enjoy it.
Most definitely.
So JJ liked it, pitched it. I'm assuming Vince, I don't know who else. And basically the comment was that not at this time. We're not taking anybody else on. We're letting people go. We're cutting salaries. So it never happened.
Wow.
So, but I was this close.
So close. That'd have been
so cool.
George, that'd have been amazing, man.
And it's a great story to tell,
It is. That was brilliant.
Yes.
It's just one of the thousands of amazing stories I'm sure you have to tell.
Yes. Thank you.
It's especially with JJ and the Four Horsemen.
And he, yes. On one of, I'm not going to expand too much on this, but I will say this. When WWE did one of the several documentaries on Ric Flair, as one of the extra features on there, they asked Rick, man, you've been everywhere and you've had the best parties here and there and everywhere. If you had to pick one, which one would that be? And he said, well, that was easy. He says, Jim Crockett Cup in Baltimore. I was there.
Oh.
I was there.
So I'm not even going to ask you about any stories from that.
It was incredible.
I mean, that's almost like being bearing witnesses to like some of the most. I'm trying to like compare it so that for the listeners to go to like, hey, this is the Crockett Cup. This is like sitting there at the Olympics and watching them hand it out. This is like watching the heavyweight championship of the world in boxing hand out. This is like being at the Stanley Cup. This is like one of those pinnacle wrestling moments.
In the Super Bowl. This is the after party after winning the Super Bowl.
And again, the thing that goes into wrestling that I don't think enough people give the respect to is it's an athletic sport. You have to be conditioned. You have to be in shape. You have to be able to sell the image of yourself as a wrestler. But it's also how you connect with the audience in that way to get yourself over for the company to want you to be the guy who's the face, the representation, the winner of it.
Right.
And that's like such a twofold thing. To some guys are amazing in the ring, but they just don't have that flair to grab people. And then some people have all the flair in the world. They just have no ring ability whatsoever.
Yes.
And it's such this weird counterbalance to find someone who just hits that middle stride. It's like the three guys of the classic for me is like Hulk Hogan, Ric Flair, and Randy Savage. And I think Randy Savage is really great ring work and a really great personality. Hogan's really good, and Flair's really good personality. Randy Savage is like the perfect mixture of Hogan, who's not good in the ring, but a great personality. Flair, who's great personality and good in the ring. His moveset's just not as developed as you'd like. And then there's Randy Savage, who's just all-encompassing great.
Well, and I appreciate you bringing up Randy's name. I see the amazing wrestling body behind you there. So thank you for that. And it's actually 10 years ago that Randy passed away. So much respect for Randy. I was blessed to meet him and Elizabeth as well. And they were kind enough we didn't get into the other part of my life with me being in education, but they were kind enough to do like a generic autograph to Mr. P students, which I then Xeroxed. Love Randy Savage, Miss Elizabeth, which I then Xeroxed and passed out to all my students, so they had a copy of Randy's and Elizabeth's autograph.
Honestly, that would have made you my favorite teacher ever.
Just because you're a fan of wrestling, I mean, you would have been my favorite, first of all.
Yeah. Yes.
I mean, period. And just because you're so awesome, and I'm sure you're just a great teacher. But you were actually a principal in Virginia, correct?
Yes, correct. I was so kind of, I guess, rewind the tape a little bit.
Yeah, sorry.
Eventually, while the wrestling stuff was happening, I had to do something for a living. I've been working since the age of 12, up until I retired about a year and a half ago. Worked at a factory, the same factory where my father worked after school, and then all through my life, and then went to college and became a teacher. But I always wanted to be an administrator, not because I was looking for that level, but my thought process was, okay, you want to get married, you want to have a family. Teachers, even today, don't make a lot of money, but back 40 years ago, they made even less.
Right.
But administration, you can make the money. And so I eventually moved into administration, first as night school principal while I was teaching during the day, so I could get that foot in the door. Mm-hmm. And then eventually during the day, I became an assistant principal for middle school. And then the last few years, I went back into the classroom so that way I could have my summers off and I could go, because I was a 12-month employee and you could never get away. But then my father passed 30 years ago. My mother moved back to Greece as she was getting older, and I'm a mama's boy, and I wanted to be able to go and see her and my sister because they moved back over there. And so I went back into the classroom so that way I could go and visit them. And I was very blessed to be able to do that. But just adding a little accent to the story, you said, Chase, I would have been your favorite teacher. The other thing that I did back then when I would film the matches, this is before standardized testing and all those things that they're doing now. I actually, the carrot stick that I held up for the students, because they were all wrestling fans, because it was so huge. So if all of you pass the test for that particular week, the next day, I'm going to bring my projector in. We're going to put this thing up in the class and show them those highlights, because that's the one thing that I do want to make sure fans listening understand. There was no way I could film a half an hour match. Or we talked about Flair and 90 minutes. I just wouldn't have the money.
Yeah, the technology just wasn't there. Even like you said, there was just maybe like 3 minutes of film on a reel at the point.
Yes. So and that was very expensive to develop. And so I would film highlights of the matches, but I was also astute enough. And going back to my frustrated director comment that I made earlier, back then, if they put you in a headlock, they kept you there for a few minutes. So I figured it out. Okay, headlock, good. I can get this shot here. I can quickly get up my seat, run up the stairs for a little bit, get this angle from over here. It's still the headshot, the headlock, I mean. And honestly, when you look at my footage, it looks like you think there's 2 or 3 cameras there, but in reality, it's just me going to different places and getting that angle.
Well, no, it's funny you mentioned that, because that's like the early editing, and me and Jay are having the conversation last week even of the differences of watching wrestling live over watching it like recorded or over television. And it's one of the big differences is the angles and the ability to see, like they can cover spots and they just the way they can capture it on camera. And like that sounds like what you were doing in those early days, just editing around and showing those different angles. That's a real, again, frustrated directors. We're all brilliant artists.
That's right. We talked about the match, and I don't know if you said you wanted to get into about my footage and selling it to WWE.
Yes,
but the Battle of the Nature Boys, one of my favorite shots in there is actually they're wrestling in the ring, and then I stopped for a minute, and they had changed what they were doing in there, so there was no way to have a smooth transition, as what we're saying now. Bill Apter and George Napolitano, now those are famous names in the wrestling magazines. Okay. And so what I did is I have a nice close-up of Bill Apter for a quick second, taking a picture, and then I'm back into the action in the ring. So
That's
So
just
those are the little tricks of the trades that I use.
And you taught yourself, and you're just learning this on the fly.
Yes.
As far as, the way to change your shots and everything. So what's called a jump cut, you wouldn't have jump cuts and everything in all of your footage moving from shot. That's brilliant. I mean, that's amazing.
And just how much wrestling you had to have watched to mentally figure out the pacing of it. Going, oh, headlock, I got time. Oh, they're going for the big spots. Oh, okay, I don't have much time. Let me get in the angles. I mean, that's just an internal clock that you just form. I mean, me and JR work in television, and a lot of that just comes down to the internal clock of, no, that's been 3 minutes. That's been this. It's time to move the camera. And that's just such a skill that's acquired.
And for the fans listening, all the high spots that we see today when we watch the product, that wasn't the norm back then. So they worked a nice slow pace. So it was easier for me to, to do that.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, well, and then again, it goes back to the storytelling of it all. I think that's high spots are one of the sacrifices. I think it's either a really cool methodical story that is, again, it's one of those trains. I really like Cody Rhodes a lot as a modern wrestler, but he wrestles a style like Flair and his father Dusty Rhodes did, which are more methodical, drawn out matches where the story's in the ring. But then you have someone like Kenny Omega or the Bucks, where it's like the story is, look at what they can do. There's not really a story. It's more or less Circus Soleil in the ring.
Yes, that's a beautiful description. I love Cirque du Soleil, and there's a beautiful description.
Where like I'll sit there and go like Cody, Dusty, Savage, and Flair. Those men are putting on like plays. The ring is a stage for the Bucks and Ricochet and modern wrestlers. Like, I love Lucha Libre wrestling. I think it's amazing to watch. But again, that's a lot of Circus Soleil. It's a lot of, this is the circus. It's just in a ring instead of under the big top.
So I want to add one little thing in before we get to the footage. Bringing the whole JJ deal full circle. Now, I'm also involved with a local independent promotion called Virginia Championship Wrestling. I'm the commissioner.
Awesome role to have.
I'm the Teddy Long. I'm the poor man's Vince McMahon. So I'm the one that comes out in that suit and tie and makes the matches. And on one of them, gosh, I can't believe this is like 3 years ago now. We actually had JJ come in. I brought him in as the commissioner because he was my friend. And at that time, he had a podcast like you guys, JJ's podcast, and he promoted coming over for over a month. It was incredible to hear JJ, talk about coming to Virginia Championship Wrestling and coming to help his good friend George Pantas, because I had a pain in the neck manager who was managing our version of the world's champion, Brandon Scott, and the manager's name was Jerry Stephanidis, another Greek guy. Okay. And so I said, okay, I can't take this guy anymore. I'm going to bring JJ in to keep him in his place. JJ said, I got you, George. I'll come in. JJ turns on me.
Of course.
Helps Brandon win.
Of course.
And then to add shame on top of shame, he takes that shoe off and bops me on the head with it.
Oh. But that's one of those spots you just want to take. It's almost like, hey, if I'm going to be in the ring with you, I need to take this. That's
right.
Like going back to the Undertaker, it's like, hey, tombstone me.
Yeah,
all right, that's what I want.
So very blessed that I've been able to transition into that line of work as well. And of course, with COVID, we have been on hiatus now for a good year and a half. And we're hoping as the conditions are becoming less and less strict, once our governor here gives us the thumbs up that we're back to 100% normal, we will definitely start running our matches again. And
awesome.
Yes, very, very excited. So cool. Very excited. For the fans watching, Virginia Championship Wrestling on Facebook, VCW Wrestling.com as a website. Check us out.
Yep. And there's a YouTube channel and everything. I was actually just watching Dorian DeVille, I believe, which is Luke Gallows, I believe.
Yes.
I was watching him wrestle the Barbarian before we got started with this interview. And just I guess the jump into VCW, I want to know like what and how got you into being the commissioner of VCW
Okay.
but also some of the names and everything that's come through as
And
your time with VCW.
and Chase, just to add a little bit more on the comment about what JR was watching, when Luke Gallows left VCW, and he left as the VCW champion, he left because he went up to WWE. So, and I think that says so much about the kind of wrestlers that we have in our promotion.
Yeah.
That definitely have the ability to take it to the next level. Brandon Scott, the name that I mentioned just a few minutes ago, he's actually done a lot of enhancement work in WWE. Everything from being an EMT person to taking the hands from Braun Strowman.
Got those hands?
Yes.
Well, and that's one of those cool things, man.
Independent talent, and they literally come from. We have a good relationship with Booker T's promotion, and
because he's out of Texas, right?
In Texas, yes. And we have some of the guys that come all the way from Texas to wrestle for us. Our current VCW champion now is Gino, and he's one of Booker T's proud products. And then we also get different independent guys from up and down the coast. But some of the big names, when Ric Flair, speaking of Ric Flair, when he first retired in his match with Shawn Michaels, we were one of the first independent groups to bring him in.
Oh, wow. That is.
And that was, for me, that was, I got to do gorilla position for Ric Flair at our show. It was one of those, pinch me, this isn't happening.
Right.
And then, okay, I can die now and go to wrestling heaven.
That is.
I did gorilla position for Ric Flair.
Just, for the listeners and everything, explain what that means, please.
Yeah, what is gorilla for the people who would not know what that is?
Gorilla position is named after Gorilla Monsoon, very famous wrestler up in the WWF, who actually owned a piece of the wrestling business, and eventually sold it to Vince. He doesn't like the word junior, so we're not gonna. I don't like calling him that. If I don't like that name, why are you calling me that? So out of respect, I'm not going to use that term. But you had Vince, the father, who sold it to Vince, the son, who we now know as Vincent Kennedy McMahon. So Gorilla actually sold his part of the business to Vince Kennedy McMahon. And for the longest time, the gorilla position is named after him because he would stand right before you pass the curtain to go into the match. And it's called the gorilla position out of respect for him, because he would stand over there, critique the matches, tell the guys, okay, it's time for you to go, call the behind the scenes shots, if you will. So that's the gorilla position. To answer your question, JR, how did I get into it? I actually promoted another, when Mid-Atlantic Championship Wrestling, Jim Crockett Promotions, sold their business to Turner. Okay, that was 1988 when they sold it to Turner. Some of the guys, Paul Jones, Ricky Steamboat, and a man behind the scenes that helped the Crockett's a lot by the name of Sandy Scott, they actually put together another promotion in the Carolinas to try to kind of continue that legacy. And eventually it became the name of South Atlantic Championship Wrestling. And I actually was the Virginia promoter for that. We only did a couple of shows because eventually they went out of business, and that's too much of a story to get into.
Right.
But
we'll have you back for that one.
Yes. But my main event that night was Chris Chavis versus Vince Torelli for the South Atlantic title. You know both of them better as Chris Chavis would be Tatanka from WWE. And Vince Torelli would be Ken Shamrock.
Wow.
Yes.
Oh, wow.
Yes. And we did an angle for them to come back. It was amazing.
Oh, that's so cool, man. And that's a match you would never see, because those guys are two different generations, and you have them in the main event. That's like the indies, man. You never see these things. Like, these are matches you don't ever think of seeing. And then Tatanka versus Ken Shamrock. You're right, I didn't know who that was until you told me those names, and now I'm just like, my geek brain is just exploding at the thought of those styles meshing.
And if we can impress on the audience listening and watching this, the importance of those indies, it's if you want to see them and touch them and get the pictures with them before you have to pay $100 and you still can't see them up close.
Yeah.
You got to promote, you got to go to these independent shows, because those guys have to, and young ladies, they have to get their experience somewhere, and they get them at these independent shows.
Absolutely.
That's how they build their followings and everything. And, and like you said, you get a chance to get up close and personal with them on this level before they get to the big level.
Well, and that's been one of those fun things about doing this channel, has gotten me and JR more into independent wrestling. And there's just been some wrestlers that I had never heard of before hopping into it that are some of my favorite now. Like in the middle of 2020, Warhorse, who is just one of the, like, paints his face and is like a 5'5" ultimate warrior with all like the anger and rage and just road warrior-esque-ness of it. I'm like going, man, you're awesome. You buy this gimmick of being this kind of like cruiserweight brawler, and I dig it. And I would never have known him if I didn't go research indies.
Yes.
So you're right, man. You never know what you're going to find on these lower card shows, and they're great.
That's right. So JR, I had that experience of promoting, and when Virginia Championship Wrestling was here in this area, it was actually started by, I want to make sure I pronounce the name right, Ronald Noel back in 1996. Okay. And for over 20 years, it was promoted by Travis Bradshaw. And I eventually became friends with some of them, with Travis and with Jerry, that manager that I mentioned earlier. And I get a call that their ring announcer couldn't make it, and would I mind going and ring announcing? Now, this was after I left administration, because obviously as an administrator, I couldn't be punishing students for fighting and then be involved in a show about fighting. So I stayed away.
Well, that's kayfabe, though.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I stayed away for a long time when I was administrator.
Yeah.
Back into the classroom, it was easier to get that foot back in.
Gotcha.
And actually, it was Greg Valentine was in, one of those names in there. So anyway, I went as the ring announcer, and then we got to talking. And out of all the guys there, I mean, I'm the oldest one, so I had that look of being a commissioner, and they needed somebody of authority for those kind of things to happen. So we talked about it. I bought in a little bit into the territory and became the commissioner. And then there's a whole bunch of beautiful storylines, Chase. I think JR has seen some of them, where I wound up losing my job as the commissioner, and eventually I had to get into the ring and wrestle for my job.
Well, that's just the story of it, though. I mean, every commissioner.
And before, and I don't know if I told JR this before, going back to some of the names that I mentioned Rick, but another name that we brought in was Roddy Piper. And I was actually blessed enough to be in a Piper's Pit.
Let's get real. We're going to have two young guys like this. This guy's a school teacher. I think I'll slap him in the face. This guy's a school teacher. Let's quit playing games. I got an idea. No, because I'm not one not to come up with an idea. I know how to fix this. Guys are in shape. It's not fair. Why don't you fight him? No, you fight him. You go away. You got the nights off. You fight him.
Oh, yeah.
Let's see him. I'll stand in the corner. You take him. You guys get out, stand in the corner.
Another manager tricked me. I was so angry against this Jerry guy that I wanted to get my hands on him so bad that his lawyer gave me a contract to sign. I'm thinking I'm going to fight Jerry, but I had to fight the tag team champions.
Oh, the
handicap match if I wanted my job back.
Yeah.
Match of the VCW tag team champions versus George, who's not a wrestler. And then we have the Piper's Pit, and Piper finds out about it, and he saves me. He tears up the contract, and makes a different kind of a match. And just to be in a Piper's pit with Roddy Piper was incredible.
Goodness gracious.
And for the fans listening,
Sure.
I just want to say for a second what an amazing human being he was. He watched all of our matches. He took the time. We didn't ask him to do this. This was all on his own. He took the time after each match to talk to some of our young guys and, you know, critique them and praise them, and just incredible. And then we, of course, we did a meet and greet with the fans. He took the time to talk with them, do the pictures, listen to what they were saying. I can't compliment him enough.
That does my soul good to hear, George. I mean, Rowdy Piper is one of my 5 favorite wrestlers of all time. I was a huge, I mean, even his movies, his B science fiction movies, I would go out and watch and rent. He was one of my favorite characters in WCW and WWF. Whenever his music would hit, I would just pop off as a fan. And so just to hear that you worked with him and in a Piper's pit, and that he was just a genuine good person who cared about the business and the people coming up in the business, that's so cool to hear, man. Thank you for sharing that.
Yes, sir. Piper, Flair, Brutus the Barber Beefcake, Greg Valentine, Booker T.
Love Booker T.
Carlito. I mean, I can go on and on. We've just been very, 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 very blessed.
Well, if we can go back for a second, I remember before we started recording, you mentioned there was a Road Warrior story,
right?
Oh, me.
And I did mention how much I that's what got me into wrestling. Were the Road Warriors.
Well, they're wrestling at the Norfolk Scope. David Crockett and I have become even better friends now. And at that time, we knew each other and respected each other. And he respected my, you know, what I had to offer as far as helping out.
Mm-hmm.
And so something happened where they didn't have transportation after the matches to go to their hotel. And so David says, George, do you mind taking LOD? Well, they were Road Warriors. Do you mind taking the Road Warriors? So we're talking Animal, we're talking Hawk, and we're talking Paul. Okay. Do you mind taking their hotel? I said, not a problem.
I mean, that's prime. That is prime Road Warrior.
Except the problem was I had a little Chevette. Not okay. I mean, little Chevette. Okay? And this is where the story becomes a lot of fun.
It's 2-door, right? A 2-door hatchback, right?
It was a 4-door, yes. With
okay. It was a hatchback, though.
Very small. Okay. Keyword very small. But there was no way I was gonna turn down the opportunity to have them in my car, right?
No, absolutely not.
Now, after I said yes, I also like, wait a minute, they're bad guys. The fans are gonna destroy my car when they I'm like panicking because I wasn't parked underneath. Underneath was full, so I was parked across the street with everybody else.
Right.
So I'm just praying that the fans had left by the time they get ready and they shower and everything. So we get to the car and the fans over there banging. At this point, come on, guys, get in. We got to get out of here. We got to get out of here. And so we're driving. Now, it was summertime, okay? And this is the funny part of the story. And so I'm sitting in the front. Animal is next to me. Hawk is in the back, squeezed like sardines. And Paul is back there. And at a certain point, Paul says to Animal, Animal, George has the air conditioner on. Close the window. And he goes, I can't. And I'm thinking, it wasn't an electric button. It was one of those that you turn the handle.
Yeah.
You know, what does he mean he can't? Of course you can. And I said, what's the problem? He said, I can't put my arm in from the window. So I could turn it and close it. His chest was so huge. His arms were so huge. What you and I do for granted, take our arms and put them down.
Yeah.
Oh my God. Yeah, because at the end of the day, that was the only reason. Well, they gave me good money too, but what eventually made me say yes was this footage is just sitting in my closet. It's an incredible documentation of history of the young Ric Flairs and the Steamboats and all the other names that I mentioned that people will never see these matches because, and I think I forgot to go back to this, when they asked Ric Flair, I mentioned this earlier, but didn't finish my sentence or my thought. When they asked Ric Flair about your great matches with Steamboat, their response was, you should see us, 20 years before. And those are the matches that I have on my films.
Like, that's so cool. I mean, you talk about being a
That's
history teacher, and
amazing.
you're a wrestling historian too.
Yeah, that I take full pride with.
Like,
And so High Spots, I don't know if you guys are familiar with High Spots. It's located in Carolina. They're a huge wrestling superstore. And they reached out to me because they found out that, wait a minute, I haven't told the story so long, I'm messing it up. Are you guys familiar with Mid-Atlantic Gateway?
Mid-Atlantic Gateway, I'm not. No, sir.
Okay, that's okay. Okay, midatlanticgateway.com documents North Carolina Mid-Atlantic wrestling history to the T.
Oh, okay.
Oh, that's cool.
There's two guys running it, Dave Chappell and Dick Bourne. And through Dick, he wanted to see, we became friends. He wanted to see some of my footage that I had. So we transferred it onto DVD. And then once it was on DVD, it was Dick Bourne that says, George, you should contact High Spots and see if they're interested in some of your footage.
Right.
Well, I contacted them, and come to find out they were putting together a documentary on Jim Crockett Promotions. And I had the footage.
Yeah. You had the gold mine. They probably were like so ecstatic when you got up with them.
And so we worked out a deal, and it is an amazing story. They did an excellent job. The director, Michael Elliott, did an incredible job of putting everything together. For true wrestling fans, especially in the Carolinas, if you're, want to know about Jim Crockett Promotions, you got to check out the documentary. Also, while we're plugging, let's also plug Adfreeshows, Conrad Thompson. I would think you guys are familiar with Conrad.
Yes, sir.
Mm-hmm. Okay,
yes, sir.
Conrad is a dear friend, and Conrad was able to do a 5.5-hour interview with Jim Crockett. And Jim, of course, sadly passed a couple of months ago. Mm-hmm. So it's the last documented interview with Jim Crockett Jr. And some of my footage that I did not sell to WWE is actually on that Jim Crockett interview. So I highly recommend those listening to join Adfreeshows. And not only will you see everything without commercials, ad-free, and see so many, he's got everybody from Kurt Angle to JR to Conrad to Bruce Pritchard, and on and on. And you're able to see all of that before it goes on regular podcast outlets. And my footage is on there, and what WWE has and has not shown, you can see, so much more on that interview. So I wanted to kind of work that in there. Oh, so no. High Spots is over. I mean, not over. That story is over. We put the documentary together, got rave reviews when it came out in 2013. And then at that point, now I'm thinking, well, if they loved it, I have the carrot that I know would grab the attention of WWE. And that is what we referred to earlier, the Battle of the Nature Boys, how Ric Flair got the name Nature Boy, because he wasn't the first. Right. The original Nature Boy was Buddy Rogers. And Buddy Rogers was very good friends with what in the wrestling business we call the booker, the person that kind of put together some of the different angles. Mm-hmm. And so Rick was just making a name for himself in the Carolinas, and they knew this guy was money, and they were trying to get him to the next level. And so George asked Buddy Rogers to come down to the Carolinas and basically do the favor, what we talked about earlier, Chase, do the favor and put Rick over. And the prize was the Battle of the Nature Boys. They wrestled 3 times in the arenas. I have the only known footage of them wrestling at an arena. They did some stuff on TV at the studio. They wrestled in Richmond at the Norfolk Scope and one of the arenas in North Carolina.
I mean, that's wow. I'm going to go back to it, man. You are the wrestling historian.
Yes, sir. And so I knew if I could get them to listen to my comment about this is the footage that I have. You know, the key to everything, you got to have those connections.
Yeah.
Connection.
They would bite, because I also knew Hunter, God bless him, loves the history of wrestling.
Yeah.
Of course, we know how much he loves Ric Flair now and back then.
Absolutely.
If you've seen early pictures of him at the training school with Killer Kowalski,
The blonde
Right?
hair. Oh
He's
yeah,
Ric Flair.
he's going for that Ric Flair look. Those
Yes.
early days.
So I knew if he could find out that I have this footage, they'll buy it.
Absolutely, man.
Okay. And then I'll throw another name out there, because if it wasn't for Dan, this would not have happened. Dan Milliken. He's a belt maker. He's done a lot of the belts that we see on TV. He's the one that put them all together.
Yeah.
So Dan had a connection. Dan Milliken. Fans, danmilliken.com. Check out his belts. And he had a connection. So Dick Bourne, the guy from Mid-Atlantic Gateway, knew Dan, put me together with Dan. Dan put me together with the archivist of WWE, a guy by the name of Ben Brown, who, if you watch any of these A&E shows that we talked about, the memorabilia shows, in every episode, Ben is there, because Ben is the one that has to authenticate the items.
Oh, that's cool.
Yes. And so Ben found out that I had this footage. I sent him some information, sent him some private links for him to look at. And then once he showed Hunter the Battle of the Nature Boys, Paul told him, make it happen. And we made it happen.
Oh my goodness.
And I was smart enough to wheel and deal. We finally came to an amount that we were happy with, but they also threw in, anytime the WWE comes to my area, free tickets, not just for George, but 4 tickets.
Oh, wow.
Every time they come, forever and ever.
You, sir, are a good wrestling commissioner.
Oh,
you got to work the deal.
There's more. Also, free tickets to WrestleMania.
Oh.
Okay. Not every one of them. I don't want to. That's the 30, the one that I mentioned earlier.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
Yep.
Okay. To that one.
Okay.
And I was also, and this just, again, God is good every day. There was no way I was going to trust that footage in the mail to send it to them.
No.
And then, God forbid, something happens. So I said, if you guys want it, you got to fly me up there.
I'm going to ask you about this.
Limo picked me up from my house to take me to the airport. First class up there.
Oh.
Limo from the Jersey airport to Connecticut, or Kennedy, I think it was. Put me up in a 5-star hotel. And then I had asked, that was not part of the deal, but I had asked Ben, I said, since I'm coming up there, I'd love, if at all possible, if they're there, any of the McMahon family, Hunter, I'd love to thank them for buying it.
Oh, absolutely.
So we go to I got to go to the WWE headquarters. I got to tour. You guys would appreciate this, given your line of work. I toured their television facilities. It was
That's
amazing.
JR's dream.
Oh, amazing.
Oh, I'm sure.
They showed me this area where, if Connecticut, or where are they? Stanford. And if the city were to have a blackout, they will still be able to do their work, because they had that powerful of a system to keep everything going.
Wow.
So
you got to go to the warehouse and everything too. Right?
He takes me to the headquarters. And then he says, George, this is the headquarters. This is this. And then he goes, I'm sorry, none of the McMahon family are here. Like, oh. And then he goes, but I have hopefully something else you'll like. Okay, what is it? So I'm going to take you to it. Okay. I got a one-on-one tour of the WWE warehouse. Everything from the Shawn Michaels jackets, from the original WWF belt that Buddy Rogers had, that Bruno Summer, I mean, you name it, recent stuff. This was 2014, so at this point we're talking, 7 years ago. So everything they had on this WWE's Most Wanted Treasures, at the end of the show, they always wind up at the warehouse again for Ben to authenticate things. And Stephanie and Hunter are the hosts of the show, and they have a young man by the name of AJ Francis that travels with a named wrestler to go find the items, and to be able to see the caskets. We talked about that Undertaker and Paul Bearer connection with me. I have an amazing picture of standing right next to the caskets.
Oh,
so to have that tour of the warehouse.
Oh my goodness!
I mean, just for the historian of wrestling to be in like literally just a gallery of wrestling history. That I can't imagine.
To see it, to touch it, to feel it. It was I was Charlie Bucket. And I was at Willy Wonka's.
Right.
Yes.
Right.
I mean, that's how
Beautiful analogy right there, man.
Yes.
I love
That's
that.
amazing. So, like, just to tie it all together, I forgot we are running a little bit short on time, but it's okay. The Iron Sheik and Axe from Demolition story and Gordon.
Oh, yes.
Couldn't forget about that one either.
And this was an amazing moment for me, Chase, because I got now. Do either one of you know the name Gordon Soley?
Of course.
Okay,
Gordon. You are more than me, but I do know the name.
Yes. Okay. He was an announcer for Florida Championship Wrestling and then for the Superstation WTBS. So this is 1982. And as I mentioned earlier, I'm Greek. And I was like the Lions Club or the different, what do you call it? The different organizations that do charity work. There's a Greek American organization called AHEPA. And they have local chapters. I was the local chapter president back then. And they have national conventions. And that year, it was in Atlanta. By the way, I forgot to say this. When I was there, I also met Abdullah the Butcher.
Oh, come on.
But I paused because I just realized it wasn't that same year. It was a couple of years later. Okay. But I met him as well. And that was amazing. But going back to this one real quick. And so... I knew that I was going to Atlanta. And at that time, one of the things that Gordon Soley would do is he would always say, it was a small studio with very, very small number of fans there. But he would always say, and today we have in our audience like regular fans, but from different states. And they would make a point to recognize them. So I'm like, I can do this. If I'm going to go there, I want to go see this show. And so I called, just old school calling up operator and asking to be connected with the station over there. And they gave me a young lady, and I said, I'm coming. I just want a ticket to get. There were free tickets, but because the venue is so small, you had to not pre-register, but whatever.
Reserve.
What's the word?
Reserve.
Yeah. Okay. Have your name down. So she wrote my name down. And she said, but George, you got to get there early because we fill up quickly. And if they fill up quickly and you're not there, they'll put somebody else in there because they want the place to look full. I said, okay, but if something happens because I'm staying at a hotel, can I say your name that you told me I could come in? And she said the magic words for me. I'm not going to be there, George. That's a Saturday. That's all I needed to hear because now I remember the story of using the girl's name. On the top to
full circle, all the way back.
So now I had a name. When I got there,
Brilliant.
Sure enough, because I had to wait for a taxi and all that, but I couldn't get in. But I dropped the name. Well, and honestly, I don't remember. I wish I could remember her name. Susie so-and-so said for me to come in. I came all the way from Virginia. Okay, sir, come on in. And then they would cut for breaks. The way that they filmed the show back then is they filmed it live in the sense that they ran the camera from, I think it was 9 o'clock till 12, and then they would air it at 6 p.m.
Okay.
Okay. And then they would cut for commercials. And then when they would cut for commercials, there was definitely time there. So during one of those commercials, I just walked over to Gordon Soley. I said, hello, sir, huge fan, blah, blah, blah. Again, at this point, Chase, I'm just a fan. Okay, this is 1982. No involvement professionally in any way.
Yeah,
and I came from Virginia. I'm what I just said earlier about the HEP organization and all that. and then that was it. I went and sat down. Now, it wasn't until I came back that I was told, and I have it, I pulled it off YouTube, so I'm going to send it to you guys to see it. And sure enough, at a certain point, and with us today is George Pantas. He's the president, blah, 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 blah. It was like, oh my God, Gordon Soley has mentioned my name. Okay. So the show is over. And what they would do at that time is the fans leave, and then the wrestlers stay back because they got to cut those promos in those days. And Saturday night, we're going to be in Altoona, Pennsylvania. We're going to be in Lexington. Okay.
Yep.
Well, I knew they were going to do that. So I decided to stay. And so, sure enough, they tried to send me out. But Susie said, you can check with her. Give her a call. We didn't have cell phones back then.
Have time to do that.
82. There's no calling anybody.
Okay, sir.
Oh,
you can stay.
Yeah.
And once I was back there, the wrestlers were okay with me. Number one, those two, the Superstar, which was Axe from Demolition in the WWF, but at that point he was known as the Masked Superstar. The Iron Sheik, they knew me from Mid-Atlantic. So when they saw me, I was cool because they knew me from there. So I was able to stay back, watch them cut their promos, and thank God I was able to had a little camera there and took some pictures. And it's just one of those amazing blessings that continue to happen my way.
Just everything happens for a reason. Just timing is everything. It's just, man, these stories. I mean, I swear I could, and I want to talk to you forever. Like I don't want to. I mean,
you're gonna have to come back.
Like, because we haven't even touched. We barely scratched the surface on all the stuff that you've done.
Yes, and there's definitely some other cool stories that we can share.
This is an introduction to you to the show and to our listeners. George, you have to come back, sir. Please come back.
I second that emotion.
Yeah.
Second that emotion. What a great song that is, by the way. Yes, George, Mr. George Pantas, and everybody. Again, George, will you please plug again all the stuff that you have out and everything with everywhere everybody can
very good.
Hear your stuff.
Let's go with High Spots first. Fans go to the www.highspots.com or High Spots Superstore on Facebook, and there you will see amazing amount of wrestling items from the wrestling buddies to DVDs to interviews and everything else. And on there is the documentary, Jim Crockett Promotions, The Good Old Days. And you'll be able to, I don't know if they'll be able to get the DVD anymore, but they have a network service. And on their network, you can actually see the documentary. And all of them, Jim Crockett, David Crockett, Jackie Crockett, J.J. Dillon, Baby Doll, all the names of that time are in that documentary as part of the interview. And yours truly is also interviewed on the second disc. And there I tell the story that I told you guys about going all the way down from the top.
Yeah,
that's incredible.
That's so cool.
So that I definitely want people to continue to purchase and find out the history. And then of course on now Peacock with the WWE, we go to the hidden gems section, and then if you type Ric Flair and Buddy Rogers, Ric Flair, Greg Valentine, Ric Flair, Harley Race. I have an amazing match with Flair and Harley Race. That one is on there. And then also, as I said, the rivalries between Ric Flair and Steamboat. My footage is on there as well. And our local promotion, Virginia Championship Wrestling. So Virginia Championship Wrestling on Facebook, on YouTube. And also we have we have a website, vcw-wrestling.com. And I left out, the Adfreeshows with Conrad Thompson. On there, look for the Jim Crockett interview. It was done, it came out mid-March, and it's part 1 and part 2, and part 1 is where there's a good 40 minutes of my footage of different wrestling matches.
Awesome. I'm going to look all of this up as soon as we wrap up and we close down shop here. I'm going to go subscribe and find everything you have just mentioned, George. Excellent. It all sounds great.
Definitely.
So I thank you, gentlemen. Thank you, audience, for listening to our great time together here. And we will see you again very soon.
Absolutely.
Absolutely, Mr. Pantas. Thank you again for
thank you
joining
again
us.
for coming on the show.
And like he said, everybody, thank you all for listening to or watching us here on Effin' Wrestling, soon to be Jumping the Barricade. I am JR. That is Chase joining us with Mr. George Pantas, and we will talk to you next week. Thank you.
Goodbye.